The familiar legend of Rapunzel has a much older, darker origin point, one that begins in 17th century Italy. This first literary appearance is a raw tale of scandal, filled with details so profound they were deliberately suppressed for centuries. Its contents reveal a story fundamentally different from the one we all know. But the true mystery goes deeper than a hidden plot. It lies within the story's most powerful symbols. The iconic tower functions as more than a simple prison. Its purpose was to contain a primordial power the original storytellers themselves feared. That power is tied directly to her golden hair. This investigation will answer the question they tried to erase from history. By the end, you will understand what that hair truly represented and why its original, terrifying meaning had to be censored. Think back to the story you were told. It's etched into our collective memory, a fable as familiar as any. A desperate bargain is made over a stolen rampion plant from a sorceress's garden, a debt paid with a newborn baby. The infant, Rapunzel, is then locked away by the wicked witch, Mother Gothel, inside a tall, secluded tower with no doors and no stairs. Years pass, and Rapunzel grows into a beautiful maiden, her golden hair lengthening to impossible proportions, becoming her only connection to the world below. We all know the famous line, the witch's demand that echoes through every adaptation.
Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair!
Then, a charming prince happens upon the tower, captivated by her enchanting singing. He discovers the secret to reaching her, and a chaste, innocent romance begins. He promises rescue, and after a few obstacles are overcome by the power of true love, they are finally reunited to live happily ever after. It's a simple tale of patience, purity, and the eventual triumph of good over evil. It's a beautiful story, a perfect fairy tale. And almost every single element of it is a deliberate lie, a lie of omission, meticulously crafted to hide a far more troubling story of illicit teenage romance, brutal, terrifying punishment, and a shocking secret that 19th century storytellers decided you just weren't supposed to know. They didn't simply retell the story. They actively disinfected it. They took a complex and dangerous original, a tale simmering with adult themes, and censored it until it was rendered safe and morally clean for the nursery. Our investigation into this 400-year-old cover-up must therefore begin with the censors themselves. So, to peel back the layers of this lie, we have to start with the men who curated the very fairy tale canon we all grew up with, the Brothers Grimm. And this brings me to a question, specifically for those of you who, like me, grew up with the Disney version first. Before you ever heard about these darker origins, did you ever feel that Mother Gothel's rage seemed a little arbitrary? A little unmotivated? Let me know in the comments below. I'm genuinely curious about that first impression. To understand the censorship, we first have to understand the censors. The popular image of Jacob and Wilhelm Grimm is one of kindly, grandfatherly figures wandering the German countryside, transcribing tales from elderly storytellers by the fireside. This image is, itself, a fairy tale. The Brothers Grimm were not mere collectors. They were brilliant academics, linguists, and fierce cultural nationalists living in a time of political turmoil and fragmentation. The land we now know as Germany was then a patchwork of squabbling states. The Grimm's project, their famous collection Kinder- und Hausmärchen, or Children's and Household Tales, was not just a hobby. It was a deeply political and cultural act. Their goal was to unearth what they believed was the pure, authentic soul of the German people, a primordial mythology hidden in these stories that could serve as a literary and moral bedrock for a future unified nation. They were building a national identity, one story at a time, and this meant their work was never just about preservation. It was about presentation. They were creating what they called an Erziehungsbuch, a book of education. The stories had to be didactic. They needed to teach the virtues of obedience, piety, and purity. Anything in the source material that contradicted this mission, anything too violent, too French in its origins, or too morally ambiguous, was systematically altered or removed. They were editors with an agenda. And when they encountered the tale of Rapunzel, they found a story that, in its raw form, was fundamentally incompatible with their moral project. They found a story of teenage desire and its consequences, and they made a deliberate choice to censor the truth. The proof of this censorship is not a matter of interpretation. It is a documented, textual fact. It is the smoking gun of our entire investigation. In the first edition of their collection, published in 1812, the Grimms included a version of Rapunzel that was far closer to its darker oral and literary sources. In this version, the prince's secret visits to the tower continue for some time. Rapunzel, naive and isolated from the world, doesn't understand the physical changes happening to her body. One day, she turns to Dame Gothel and makes a fatally innocent remark. She says, "Tell me, Dame Gothel, how is it that my clothes are all getting too tight for me and will not fit any longer?" In other early versions, her comment is even more direct. She complains that the witch is so much heavier for her to pull up into the tower than the young, handsome prince. Let that sink in. The original discovery of the affair is not because of a careless word, it's because Rapunzel is pregnant. The story is not one of chaste romance. It is a tale of a secret, sexual relationship between two isolated teenagers, a relationship with profound and visible consequences. This was the story's original engine, a tale of forbidden passion and the ensuing scandal. But for the Brothers Grimm, and for the increasingly moralistic 19th century audience they were writing for, a pregnant, unmarried heroine was unthinkable. It was a stain on the story's potential as a moral lesson, a stain they chose to remove, which is the exact opposite choice I trust you're making with that subscribe button, if you believe these uncensored truths deserve to see the light. So, in their later, wildly more popular 1857 edition, the version that became the definitive one for the world, they performed a deliberate act of literary surgery. They censored it. The damning line was completely erased. Instead, Rapunzel simply blurts out in a moment of thoughtlessness, "You are so much heavier to draw up than the king's son, who is with me in a moment." It's a change that seems small, but it alters the very DNA of the narrative, disinfecting it of its most scandalous and human element. With this vital piece of censored evidence restored, the story's villain is thrown into a chilling new light. Mother Gothel is no longer a one-dimensional, cackling witch whose cruelty is random and unmotivated. With the secret of the pregnancy back in the narrative, her actions, while still horrifying, suddenly acquire a disturbing and recognizable logic. She is a guardian, perhaps even a mother figure in her own twisted way, who has dedicated years to isolating her charge from the world. Now, imagine her perspective. She discovers that her carefully constructed prison has been breached. Her daughter has not only been disobedient, but has engaged in a relationship that in their time would bring ultimate shame and ruin. She has become pregnant out of wedlock. Suddenly, Gothel's rage is not just the anger of a fairy tale monster. It is the incandescent fury of betrayal. It is the wrath of a guardian whose control has been shattered, whose charge has violated the deepest social and moral taboos of their world. Her subsequent punishment of Rapunzel is no longer arbitrary. It is a direct and calculated consequence of the censored secret. She takes the shears to Rapunzel's glorious hair, that iconic symbol of her beauty and identity, and she shears it off. This is an act of profound humiliation, a ritualistic stripping of the girl's allure and very being. Then, she casts her out into a desolate wilderness, a desert to live in great grief and misery, now a shamed single mother, abandoned and alone. For the Grimm's readers, once the pregnancy was removed, Gothel became a simpler evil. But restoring the truth reveals a far more terrifying and psychologically resonant monster, a villain whose cruelty is born from a recognizable, if terrifyingly extreme, human place. The prince's fate, too, is far from the romantic setback we see in modern retellings. His punishment is one of the most brutal in the entire Grimm canon. When he returns to the tower and calls out to his love, it is Gothel who greets him, letting down the severed braids of golden hair to lure him up. She reveals the horrifying truth. The cat has got the bird, and will scratch out your eyes as well. Rapunzel is lost to you. You will never see her again. Mad with grief and despair, the prince leaps from the top of the tower. He survives the fall. but he lands in a patch of thorns below, and they pierce his eyes, leaving him completely blind. He is not just defeated, he is mutilated. He is condemned to wander the wilderness for years, a blind outcast, eating nothing but roots and berries, doing nothing but lamenting and weeping for the loss of his beloved princess. This isn't a temporary challenge for a hero. It is a portrait of utter, hopeless devastation. It's a tragic, horrifying consequence that was deemed too grim, too punishing for the bedtime stories we tell our children. This brutal censorship proves the Grimms had a motive, but it begs a far more profound question. Why did this story, with its solar symbolism and divine punishment, even exist for them to find? They thought they were merely cleaning up a scandalous fairy tale for children, but as we are about to discover, they were unknowingly erasing the last, faint memory of a forgotten goddess, and that revelation changes everything. To dig deeper, we must look for the story's historical blueprint. If the Grimms inherited this story, where did their sources get it from? The tale of a maiden locked in a tower is a strangely specific motif, one that feels older than a simple fairy tale. And it is. The first clue to its true origin isn't found in folklore, but in the blood-soaked annals of religious history. To find it, we must travel back to the 3rd century, to the story of Saint Barbara. Barbara was the daughter of a wealthy pagan nobleman named Dioscorus. Fearing she would be corrupted by the outside world, and especially by the rising influence of Christianity, he built a magnificent tower and imprisoned her within it. His goal was absolute control over her body, her mind, and her soul. The tower was meant to be her world, a fortress against unwanted ideas. But divine thought, like light, finds a way through the cracks. During her father's absence, Barbara secretly converted to Christianity. As a symbol of her newfound faith in the Holy Trinity, she ordered the workmen building her bathhouse to install a 3rd window, creating a trio of lights where her father had commanded only 2. When Dioscorus returned, he saw the 3rd window and immediately understood its meaning. He flew into a rage. This wasn't just disobedience, it was a fundamental betrayal of his authority and his entire worldview. He dragged his daughter from the tower, tortured her, and when she refused to renounce her faith, he took a sword and beheaded her with his own hands. Legend says that as he committed this monstrous act, he was immediately struck by lightning and consumed by fire, a divine punishment for his crime. Here, in the tragic legend of a saint, we find the chilling blueprint for Rapunzel. The tower is not a magical prison from a fairy tale. It is a very real symbol of patriarchal subjugation. The captor is not a witch who stole a child, but a father trying to suffocate his own daughter's autonomy. The conflict is not over a plant, but over a belief system, over a woman's right to choose her own connection to the divine. This historical root gives us the story's horrifying framework, the tower as a tool of patriarchal control. But it doesn't explain the tale's most iconic element, the hair. For that, we have to journey to an entirely different culture, where we find a much older version of the story containing the one crucial, powerful detail Saint Barbara's legend is missing. So, Saint Barbara gives us the tower of patriarchal control. But what about the story's most iconic element, the hair? For that, we must journey from the Roman Empire to 10th century Persia, and to one of the greatest epic poems ever written, the Shahnameh, or the Book of Kings. Within this masterpiece of world literature is the story of a great hero named Zal, who falls deeply in love with a princess named Rutabaga. Rutabaga is described as impossibly beautiful, with a face as radiant as the sun, but her most celebrated feature is her hair. The poet writes that she had 2 tresses black as musk and curled like chains, so long that they trailed on the ground behind her. One night, the hero Zal comes for a secret rendezvous at her palace. He finds her at the top of a turret, but there is no rope for him to climb. So, in a moment of breathtaking romance and power, Rutabaga unfastens her incredible hair, letting it cascade down the wall for her lover to ascend. Zal is hesitant to use her sacred tresses as a common rope, but she insists, telling him her hair exists to be of service to him. He climbs, and their legendary romance begins. This is a monumental discovery. Here, centuries before the first Italian version of Rapunzel, is the motif of a maiden using her impossibly long hair for a lover to climb a tower. But notice the critical difference. In this ancient Persian prototype, the hair is not a passive tool used by the captor. It is a symbol of the maiden's active choice, her own agency and power. The act is one of romantic invitation, not of imprisonment. Rutabaga is in control. She uses her own divine gift to bring her lover to her. In Rapunzel, this very same power is usurped by the witch. Rapunzel's hair becomes the instrument of her own captivity. This inversion is not an accident. It is clear evidence of a powerful symbol being deliberately weakened over time. But to understand why this symbol of the hair was so potent that it had to be subverted, we need to zoom out and decipher the primordial code it belongs to, a code that stretches back to the very dawn of human spirituality. We have the tower of control and the hair of agency. But this raises the most fundamental question of all. Why is hair so important? Across nearly every culture in human history, hair has been seen as far more than a simple biological feature. It is a powerful symbol, a physical manifestation of a person's life force, spirit, and connection to the divine. Think of the biblical story of Samson. His supernatural strength, a gift from God, resided entirely in his uncut hair. When his lover Delilah, bribed by his enemies, cuts his hair as he sleeps, his power vanishes instantly. He becomes weak, easily captured and blinded. The parallel is exact and chilling. The cutting of the hair is the severing of one's divine power. Many Native American traditions hold that long, uncut hair functions as a kind of spiritual antenna, enhancing intuition and connection to the natural world. In Sikhism, the practice of kesh, or leaving hair uncut, is a core article of faith, a symbol of respecting God's creation and living in harmony with divine will. But Rapunzel's hair isn't just long, it is golden. This is the single most important symbolic detail in the entire story. Gold is the color and metal of the sun. From the Egyptian sun god Ra to the Greek Apollo, gold has always been the symbol of solar power, of light, life, consciousness, and divine royalty. Rapunzel's golden hair, therefore, is not merely hair. It is a direct, unambiguous symbol of the sun's rays made manifest. She is quite literally wearing the power of the sun on her head. Her hair is not just an appendage, it is her divinity. Now, with all the clues on the table, the final, shattering truth clicks into place. The censored pregnancy, the tower of patriarchal control, the hair of agency, the symbolism of divine light. They all point to one unified, breathtaking conclusion. Rapunzel is not a person. She is a mythic fossil. She is the faded ghost of a primordial solar goddess. In the ancient world, powerful female deities were not an exception. They were the norm. Countless cultures worshipped goddesses of the sun, the dawn, the sky, and the heavens. But as human societies began to shift, as pantheons gave way to monotheistic religions, and matriarchal leanings gave way to rigid patriarchal structures, these powerful goddesses posed a problem. They couldn't simply be erased from the collective consciousness overnight, so they were demoted. They were systematically subjugated, transformed from sovereign deities into monsters, demons, and witches, or domesticated into beautiful but utterly helpless mortal maidens. Rapunzel is the story of this divine demotion. The solar goddess, with her life-giving golden hair, is captured and locked away from the world in a tower, symbolizing her light being hidden from humanity. Her captor, the witch Gothel, is the embodiment of the dark, earthly, chthonic power that contains and controls her celestial light. The story is a mythic allegory for the subjugation of these ancient female deities. And the cutting of the hair? It is the story's symbolic climax. It is the moment the goddess is ritually stripped of her divinity. Her connection to the sun is severed, her power is taken. She is forcibly transformed from a celestial being into a powerless, weeping mortal, cast out into the desert to suffer. The story is the scar tissue left behind by a massive cultural and religious revolution. The censorship performed by the Brothers Grimm was not an isolated act. It was merely the final, domesticating step in a process of suppression that had been going on for millennia. They were simply finishing the job of erasing the last faint memory of a powerful, autonomous female god from our cultural stories. So, why does this story, this ancient echo of a forgotten goddess, still have such a profound and haunting grip on our modern imagination? Because, on an archetypal level, it is our story. It is a perfect and deeply resonant allegory for a universal human experience. The struggle to liberate our own potential. Each of us is born with an inner divinity, a unique gift, a core of potential that is brilliant and powerful. This is our golden hair. It is our creativity, our passion, our intellect, our true, authentic self. But too often we feel that this brightest part of us is locked away. It is imprisoned in a tower of our own or others' making. A tower of fear, of self-doubt, of societal expectations, of toxic relationships or past trauma. The witch, Gothel, is that insidious voice, both internal and external, that tells us we are not good enough, that the world is too dangerous, that we must remain hidden to stay safe. The story's central horror, the cutting of the hair, is a fear we all understand in our bones. It is the deep-seated, primordial fear of having our potential extinguished. It is the terror of having our voice silenced, our dreams crushed, our spirit broken, before we ever have the chance to see what it can do. The prince, then, represents that spark of hope, the promise of connection, be it a person, an idea, or an internal realization that shows us a world beyond our prison walls. But the original story's tragic arc, his blinding and years of suffering, serves as a crucial reminder. The journey of reclaiming our own power is never a simple rescue. It is often a painful, disorienting process. It requires wandering through our own darkness, confronting our own grief, before we can finally heal and integrate all the parts of ourselves to become whole. The legend of Rapunzel endures not as a simple fairy tale, but as a map of the human soul, a timeless guide to the terrifying and ultimately sacred journey of liberating our own inner god or goddess from the towers that confine us. We began seeking a censored secret and discovered something far older. We peeled back the Grimm's moralistic censorship, uncovered the historical trauma of Saint Barbara, and found the story's true soul. The legend of Rapunzel is not about a lost princess. It is the ghost of a forgotten goddess, a haunting story of how primordial female power was locked away, shorn, and ultimately censored from our history. But if one girl's story can hide a suppressed goddess, what happens when a story hides the disappearance of 130 children? The Pied Piper isn't a fairy tale. It's a 700-year-old cold case. In our next investigation, we uncover the chilling historical event that finally explains where they all went. Click the video on the screen now to find out.